Hey guys, welcome to the inside of this crazy brain that we have right here, right? Okay, today we're going to talk about what I call the conditional gap. And what happens as we grow, as we learn, as we mature, as we go through life, we are surrounded by all of this conditioning that's infiltrating us on every single level that we don't even recognize. And so we're going to talk about, like I said, the conditional gap. The reason I call it a gap is because it is a gap between what we are told we have to be versus who we truly are and who we were created to be, and living out of our authenticity of being exactly who we were created to be. Okay, so there's this gap, and this gap becomes the lens with which we look through in life. It's like putting on a different pair of glasses where I could walk into a room and I see a room completely different than somebody else sees the room, right? Two people, same room, different perspectives, and they have completely different opinions about everything, the feel, the emotions, the people that were in the room, the decorations, all of it. They've got entirely different perspectives. Why? Because of this conditional gap. One person has been conditioned one way, another one has been conditioned a different way, and now they're seeing the same event, but from two totally opposite perspectives. And this is really important as you engage with employees, with your managers, with your supervisors, with your owners of your companies, with the contractors you hire in for your company that you outsource for, and particularly in any kind of relationship in personal or business, right? Where you're standing from one perspective, they're standing from another, and they see two different scenarios that are happening. When you learn to capitalize on this, giving people their own space to see their perspective, being receptive to hear what they have to say, you're now seeing a broader picture than what you can possibly see. You cannot see it from their lens. You absolutely cannot. You can only see it from your lens. So this is why it's so critical to have masterminds, to have an excellent team that works around you, which is, again, I've talked about this before. I only allow A+ players on my team because they become my mastermind. They become the people with which I lean on and rely on to grow and scale and move and shake and make the right decisions about my business, right? If you don't have the right people in place and on your team, you're getting a perspective from somebody, you might as well have it be an A+ player, right? So capitalize on the people you have around you, learn to give them space and accept their perspective. But let's talk about what lives within this conditional gap, okay? So number one, there is social conditioning. So we've got social conditioning. Social conditioning would be, so think social media, right? One of the examples that I love to use, this really literally happened in my neighborhood a couple summers ago. Now it's been a couple summers where I'm in my office. My office faces the front street, the windows face the front street, right? And so I'm watching this mom who is literally dragging her kid down the street. I'm sure it was time for him to come home. He didn't want to, dragging. She wasn't abusive or anyway, but this kid's screaming, kicking, screaming, is pissed off, is not having any part of this, right? And mom's taking this little kid down. It's it's time, we're going, you're coming, kind of a deal, right? Well, 3 hours later, we get this post on Facebook from said person who is, got the crayons laid out and all the art paper laid out, and they're doing these crafts at the kitchen table, and everything is awesome, and she's going on about how great her life is, right? Well, that now gives us conditioning. We must be the perfect mom. We must do all this fun stuff. We must do the creative things, and we're receiving these inputs of what we perceive. Now, here's the caveat. The conditioning that we start to receive also goes through that gap or that lens with which we look. So that input comes in. We see that she's a perfect mom. She's got it all together. We know that's not true because we just saw what happened, 2 hours later as she's dragging him home. So we know that there's a disconnect between reality and what's really happening on Facebook. However, what we do is we take that input, and now we're making a decision based off of our conditioning, off of the things that we've been taught through our lens, and we're making meaning about it, about ourselves. So if you're a mom in this case, you're going to be like, what the crap? I suck. I suck as a mom, right? You're just seeing the post, right? You're not seeing the reality of what happened. I got to have that perspective. But when on Facebook, nobody sees that perspective. You just see this perfect mom. She's doing crafts all the time. She must be great. She must have so much fun with her kids and da da da. She doesn't see all the ugly stuff, right? So we're perceiving that, and then now we're going to start making meaning. Like, oh crap, I must be a terrible mom. I should do crafts more with my kids. I should engage more with my kids. And you start comparing yourself, and you start deciding what your life should look like based off of what other people, the conditioning that you're receiving, instead of being what you are and what you do best with your kids in authenticity. Same thing happens in business, relationships, anything and everything. So when we say social conditioning, think of Facebook, social media, Victoria's Secret model expectations, or Men's Cover magazine model expectations, right? Or your coworkers that you're in competition with, maybe the other sales guy on your team or the other person vying for that management position. We start comparing, and we're comparing not out of our best gifts, not out of what we are most capable of giving, but what we think and perceive and have been conditioned to believe the standard is, okay? So number 2, we've got parental conditioning. Think of parental conditioning of the little kid who's growing up and they say, oh, I want to be an astronaut, right? Like they're like, I got this. I'm going to put my cape on. I'm going to go to Mars. I'm going to go do this. I love it. I'm passionate. And the parents are like, yeah, you should be a doctor. And now that that parent is conditioning that kid, that their dreams are unattainable and that their dreams don't matter and that their choices don't matter and their desires are irrelevant. And the parent's rationale is, if you're a doctor, it's safe, you would make a great income for your family, you would be able to stay home, you wouldn't be traveling, blah, blah, blah. Whatever their rationale is, right? They're going to implement all that conditioning onto this little kid where you've now squelched that kid's dreams, squelched that kid's desires and creativity and boldness, right? Like, being an astronaut is a bold statement to make. It's a bold career to have. So now that little kid's desires are squelched and they're not stepping into their authenticity and they're not stepping into their ability to create their life and do whatever they want, right? We're just minimizing it. So that's parental conditioning. And number 3 is religious conditioning. Religious conditioning is a little bit of a no-brainer, right? Let's get real. Every single church building has different rules. They all say that they all come from the Bible, but based off of their interpretation, this building has one set of rules. That building has another set of cultural rules, right? Just take Catholicism, for example. Catholicism says that you have to go to the priest in order to confess your sins, that you can't go directly to Jesus or God or whatever. Whereas Protestant would say, nope, you have a direct link to God. You get to go do what you want. You can talk to God. You don't get to go do what you want. They would not say that. They would definitely say that there's sins, this, that, and the other, but you can directly repent for those sins, seek forgiveness, pray to God directly. You don't have to go through someone, right? The reality that there's a cultural difference between these two different sets of religions, right? One is very traditional and take Southern Baptists, for example. You're not allowed to dance. You're not allowed to have fun. You're not allowed to drink. You're not allowed to do, Mormons don't do coffee. They don't do caffeine. They don't do, everybody's got their own set of rules, right? So you're conditioned. Meaning I was raised in a really legalistic religion where divorce was the unpardonable sin. This is why I stayed in a highly toxic marriage for 14 stinking years when it was toxic as hell. But in the back of my mind, in my belief structure, I believed that it was the unpardonable sin. So I just buckled up, bit the stick and did what I had to do, pulled my bootstraps up and focused on my kids, poured into my kids and did what I needed to do to survive the marriage because I wasn't allowed to leave the marriage as far as my conditional gap said with the lens with which I looked. Okay, and 4th, we have got school conditioning. School conditioning is when you've got teachers that say, you can't color that leaf purple. Leaves aren't purple. You must color inside the lines. Stand in line, don't move, right? And some of this is just like learning civil law. We've got to learn to behave like not animals, right? Like humans. But that also happens where we're so conditioned into a system that it must be this way. Think college, for example. You have to go to school, then you go to high school, then you go to college, then you get out and you graduate and you've got $100,000 worth of debt. For a job, you're going to make $30,000 a year. Okay, well, you guys, my audience for sure, you're entrepreneurs, you're high-level C-suite level executives, you are busting that system and you're breaking out of this conditioning that we've been told we have to do, right? Like, we're not going to be a part of the system because we learned that that's everybody else's conditioning that we have taken on. And when we stop and we sit back and we think about it, we're like, hold on, this doesn't make sense. If I really dissect what's happening here, it doesn't make sense. 2 + 2 is not equaling 4. Why would I walk out of school with a 4-year degree that gives me book knowledge and I don't have any experience now. I'm 100 grand in debt and I land a job for 30, 40, 50 grand a year. It's going to take me a decade to pay that 100 grand off. Why would we do that, right? But people don't think about that, and they don't teach you in school to think for yourself for the most part. There's some schools that do, I'm not giving a blanket statement. There's some teachers that do. Some are phenomenal. But generally speaking, this is just a general statement. This isn't what we're taught within the constructs of the system of school conditioning. So we've got the conditional gap. So now you know what that consists of. Social, parental, religious, and school conditioning, where we are looking through the lens with which what we've been told we have to be, instead of stepping into our authenticity and being who God created us to be, thinking for ourselves, owning our statements, owning our mission, owning our vision and our desires and our hopes and our dreams, and following through on that, and going boldly moving forward into our dreams, stepping in those risks, not knowing that we're safe and that we can figure it out, and it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to fail as long as we fail faster. The statement in my house we always say is, the only failure is not learning. Everybody makes mistakes. We do it all day, every day. We can admit it, we can confess it, and we learn and we pivot and we shift and we adjust. And when you're in your own identity, you have the confidence and the ability to not berate yourself, to not beat yourself up, to not default back into your conditioning, but you get to stay in your authenticity and you get to move forward in a life of freedom that you never experienced before, okay? So that's what we call the conditional gap. We're gonna work into the belief structure and how this applies to what we do have in our subconscious. Only 5% of our brain really operates on the day-to-day. 95% of it is subconscious. We're drawing from that subconscious space, and we're going to unpack that in one of our next videos. So look for that belief pattern video next, and we will see you on the other side. If you like our videos, make sure you click the like button below, subscribe to get notified when we upload new ones, click the bell so you're one of the first to be notified, and share with people who you think could benefit from hearing about the conditional gap. You say all these things and then you step in and oh wow, I just spit all over. Scratch that one.